has a special way of seeing us that will always, always, always see the good. No matter what. God will always see the good and love us no matter what. So today, guess what? Everybody gets minion goggles, okay? Now when I say everybody, I mean everybody. So this is where I need your help. If you want to take some and then pass them out, make sure that everybody gets some, gets one. There you go. Everybody gets one. Now the other thing that I need is I forgot to bring my phone out with me. Greg, do you have your phone with you?
Yeah.
I'm going to have everybody put their minion goggles on, and I hope that was water that just dripped on my shoulder. I'm going to have everybody put their minion goggles on, and we need to take a picture, because we need a new picture of our congregation on the front of our website.
Come on, boys.
You're in disguise.
What do you need over here? Okay, these people over here.
This side's doing really well. This side's
A reading from the book of the Acts of the Apostles. Then Paul stood in front of Areopagus and said, Athenians, I see how extremely religious you are in every way. For as I went through the city and looked carefully at the objects of your worship, I found among them an altar with the inscriptions, To an Unknown God. What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in shrines made by human hands, and is not served by human hands as though God needed anything, since God alone gives to all mortals life and breath and all things. And God made from one all the nations to live on the face of the whole earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of the places where they would live, so that they would search for God, in the hope that they might feel after and find God, who is not far from each one of us. For in this one we live and move and have our being, as even some of your poets have said, for we are indeed the offspring of God. Since we are God's offspring, we ought not to think that the deity is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by the art and imagination of mortals. Here ends the first reading. Let us hear now from the Gospel according to Matthew. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which someone found and hid. Then, in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. On finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it.
So also, along with our scripture readings from sacred scripture, we hear contemporary words to ponder from none other than the movie Minions, words that would have been spoken by the narrator. Minions! Minions have been on this planet far longer than we have. They go by many names. Dave, Carl, oh, that one is Norbert. He is an idiot. They all share the same goal, to serve the most despicable master around. Finding a master was easy. Keeping a master, that's where things got tricky. But nonetheless, they kept on looking. Without a master, they had no purpose. They became aimless and depressed. If this went on much longer, they would surely perish. Then, one minion stepped forward. Kevin felt pride. He was going to be the one to find his tribe the biggest, baddest villain to serve. Stuart felt hungry, mostly. He was going to be the one to eat this banana. And Bob was frightened of the journey ahead. So here ends the reading from the movie. So, as we've already kind of talked a little bit about, minions are these little yellow creatures who evolved over time to be drawn to serve an evil master. It seems odd that such cute little humorous creatures who reflect humans in such a fun and quirky way would devote their lives to serving the most despicable master that they could find. At least it appears that that's their purpose in life. But every time they find the most despicable master to serve, in their innocence and bumbling way, they end up thwarting the evil intentions of their despicable master. So they were eventually driven out of civilization and into exile, where they found sanctuary in an ice cave. And then they're very successful in forming a community and forging a life for themselves. But they came to realize that they were without a purpose. Until one of the minions, Kevin, shared an idea that he had had for quite some time. His plan was that he would leave the cave in search for the biggest, baddest villain of all time. But he was telling them he couldn't do it alone. And so he asked for some help. So Bob stepped forward. He was eager. He was like, yep, pick me. But he really didn't have the desirable traits that Kevin was looking for. And then Stuart was really kind of not paying very much attention to what was going on, and his friends volunteered him. So there they were, the three of them, heading out to go find the biggest, baddest villain of all time. The energy and the enthusiasm of the tribe was restored because Kevin had given them something that they hadn't had for a very long time. These three set out on their pilgrimage to find their new despicable master, longing to find the master that they think would fulfill their deepest desires and give meaning to their lives. And of course, they stumble onto the possibility when they learn about a villain convention in Orlando. And then through a number of twists and turns, they end up saving the day, the Queen of England's crowned, and finding their next despicable boss. And as a result of all of that, spinning out a whole collection of marketable things, of which we are now a part. But what struck me most about Minions, from a faith perspective, was what happened to them when they were without a purpose. They had no hope. Life was good in the ice cave. They had created homes, they had developed a society, they were all part of a community, and they seemed to flourish. But they didn't flourish without a purpose. They were without hope. They became bored and lifeless. Hope is a powerful thing. It's that which keeps us going in even the hardest of times. It's what helps us set our sights for the future. It pulls us up out of depression. It picks us up when we fall down. It gives us strength to overcome even the most challenging of situations. lots of amazing people have spoken so well about hope. Emily Dickinson describes hope as the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tunes without words and never stops at all. Desmond Tutu reflects, hope is being able to see that there is light despite all the darkness. And hope is among St. Paul's top 3 essentials. Remember what they are? Faith, hope, and love. I've come to learn that hope is one of those things that tends to shift and move as the situation changes. Many of you may recall that my father passed away almost 8 years ago after falling down some stairs and hitting his head. And all through that terrible journey, hope was always present with us as his family gathered in the hospital and in the waiting room and listened to the doctors and asked questions of the nurses. We were never without hope, even though the news kept getting worse and worse. When it was evident that life going forward as we wanted it was not possible, our hopes turned toward a recovery that would ensure at least some quality of life that he would value. And when it became clear that that was not possible either, and that he had not regained consciousness, we still had hope for an end of life that would be one in comfort and without fear. We, my family, we continue with hope for many things. His memory to remain with us. One of the funky things that we do is his voice is still on the answering machine in my mother's home. And so every once in a while, if I know that she is not home, I will call just to hear my dad's voice, that distinctive, "You've reached the Spencers," hope. It's that which compels us to seek the future. When we look toward that which hasn't been yet, that's when it is that we step into hope. So, what is it for which we hope as we look into our own futures, as individuals, as a church, as society? Sometimes we forget that hope can be a force to change the world. All we have to do is to look at the past to know how powerful hope can be for the future. Some of the most powerful stories of hope and endurance come from those who face the most hopeless of situations. Read the accounts of Holocaust survivors or former slaves. This week, following the tragedy in Orlando, my mind and my heart was drawn to Harvey Milk, who was the first openly gay person to be elected to public office in California. And he confessed that hope will never be silent. As survivors of last week's massacre in Orlando begin to speak and share their horrific stories, we are beginning to hear the conviction founded in hope that such hatred and violence will not be the defining nature of our society. Hope will never be silent. Some of our greatest biblical stories emerge out of times when people were faced with hopeless situations, yet it was their profound hope in God that made them vulnerable to the saving nature of God. The Hebrews as slaves who longed for God to hear their cries. It was this hope that gave them strength. And they were liberated, not just from slavery, but into becoming a people. The Israelites, many centuries later in exile, caught up in the aftermath of a system of corrupted religious and political leadership that led to their destruction and the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple and their way of life. They longed for a return to home. It was this hope that gave them endurance until their captors were overcome and they were called back to community, to Jerusalem, to begin again. And centuries later, their descendants faced oppression and persecution at the mighty hand of the Roman Empire. And in hope, they longed for a Messiah. It was this hope, nurtured by the actions of God in the past, that delivered them into a future when Jesus was born into the midst of uncertainty. We are not void of hope today, but I still wonder, for what is it that we hope? What is it that we seek? For what is it that we long that gives us the greatest hope? For the minions, it may seem that they longed to serve the most despicable master, and indeed that's what compelled Kevin to leave the safety of the cave and take Stuart and Bob with him. But if we follow their story along, that which really brought them together was when their community was separated. Once the rest of the tribe realized where Kevin, Bob, and Stuart were, they followed. And when the tribe was threatened with destruction by the very villain that they had sought, Kevin risked his own life to save them. Throughout the great stories in history of the people of hope, there has always been a communal nature to the outcome. We do have our hopes as individuals, but it's the hope of the community that rises. When Christ rose from the dead, it wasn't a spattering of individuals going off to do their own thing that changed the world. It was a group that emerged, the church. Jesus didn't go door to door seeking individuals to follow their own way. He went from community to community, bringing people together to love and serve one another, starting with those who the culture and society were ignoring and casting aside, those who would seem to be in the most hopeless of situations, but as we have learned, perhaps had the deepest hope within them. And it was that shared hope, that shared sense of purpose that brought and kept them together. So we are inheritors of that hope. We, I guess, could be minions of hope, going forth to seek the one who gives us hope, to follow and to serve in his name.